Get on that bed right now, a dunny. You think you can refuse me? Emeka's voice boomed through our master bedroom in our Lecky home, his eyes blazing with rage and something darker. I'm your husband. You don't get to say no to me. Welcome to Stories by Tino, where we bring you the most gripping tales of love, betrayal, and justice. Thank you so much for your incredible support. Your comments, likes, and shares keep these stories alive. Before we dive deeper into this shocking story, please drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. We love connecting with our amazing viewers worldwide. Now, what would you do if this was happening in your own bedroom? Hit like if you believe marriage should never involve force, and comment below where you're watching from. I stood frozen in my silk nightgown beside our king-sized bed, my back pressed against the mahogany dresser. The soft lighting from our bedside lamps that was supposed to create romance now felt harsh and exposing. Outside our bedroom window, Legos glittered in the distance, but inside these four walls, my world was crumbling. Emeka, please, I whispered, my voice barely audible. The children are just down the hall. They might hear. Let them hear. He stepped closer, and I could smell the whiskey on his breath. Maybe it's time they learned what real marriage looks like. My heart pounded so hard I was sure he could hear it. This wasn't the man I'd married 8 years ago. That Emeka had been gentle, patient, loving. He'd courted me properly, brought me flowers, asked my father for permission. On our wedding night, he'd been so tender, so careful with my innocence. Now, at 35, that same man stood before me like a stranger. Success had changed him. The petroleum engineering job, the promotions, the money, the respect from his family, it had all fed something dark inside him that I'd never seen before. I'm not refusing you, I said carefully, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm not feeling well tonight. It was a lie, and we both knew it. The truth was, I couldn't bear the thought of being intimate with a man who'd slapped me across the face just this morning because I'd forgotten to iron his lucky shirt for an important meeting. Not feeling well? His laugh was cold, bitter. You haven't been feeling well 4 months, a dunny. What kind of wife does that make you? I flinched at his words. In our culture, in our family's expectations, a wife's duty was clear. But how could I explain that every time he touched me now, all I could think about were those same hands hitting me? How could I tell him that intimacy required trust, and mine had been shattered beyond repair? I'm sorry, I said, because apologizing had become my default response to everything. Maybe tomorrow night. Maybe tomorrow? His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper as he moved even closer. You think you can schedule when you'll be a proper wife to me? The bedroom door was behind him. There was nowhere for me to go. The beautiful master suite that had once been our sanctuary now felt like a trap. The cream silk curtains, the expensive Egyptian cotton sheets, the artwork we'd chosen together, all of it seemed to mock the prison our marriage had become. Emeka, you're scaring me, I admitted, my voice breaking. Good, he said, reaching out to grab my wrist. His grip was firm, possessive. Maybe fear will remind you of your place. That's when I saw it, reflected in the mirror behind him. My own face, marked with the faint yellow-green bruise on my cheekbone from last week's lesson about talking back. I'd covered it with makeup during the day, but under these soft lights, it was visible. And suddenly, I realized something that should have terrified me but instead filled me with an odd clarity. This wasn't love. This had never been love. Love didn't leave bruises. Love didn't use force. Love didn't make you pray your children wouldn't inherit your fear. Let go of my wrist, Emeka, I said quietly. His grip tightened. What did you just say to me? I said let go of my wrist. My voice was steadier now, stronger. You're hurting me. Hurting you? He laughed again, but there was something different in his eyes now. Surprise. In all our years of marriage, through all his escalating abuse, I had never once told him to stop touching me. You don't know what hurt is yet, a dunny. The threat hung in the air between us like a live wire. But instead of cowering, instead of immediately apologizing and submitting like I always did, I did something that shocked us both. I looked him directly in the eyes and said, "Yes, I do know what hurt is. I've been living with it for 3 years." The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, I could hear the distant sounds of Lagos traffic, the hum of our air conditioning, the tick of the antique clock his mother had given us as a wedding present. Inside our bedroom, the tension was so thick I could barely breathe. Emeka's face went through several emotions: confusion, anger, and then something that looked almost like fear. 3 years, he repeated slowly. 3 years since you first hit me, I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. 3 years since you decided that being your wife meant being your punching bag. 3 years since our marriage became about your power instead of our love. His hand was still gripping my wrist, but I could feel his shock in the loosening of his fingers. I never, he started. You never what? Never hit me? I pulled my wrist free and pointed to my cheek. What do you call this? What do you call the bruises I hide every day? What do you call the way our children flinch when you raise your voice? For the first time in years, Emeka looked uncertain. But the moment of doubt passed quickly, replaced by familiar rage. You're being dramatic, he said, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. I discipline you when you step out of line. That's what husbands do. My father disciplined my mother, and they had a strong marriage. Your mother lived in fear, I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. I see it in her eyes every time she looks at your father. That's not strength, Emeka. That's survival. The slap came so fast I didn't see it coming. The sound echoed through our bedroom like a gunshot, and immediately I tasted blood where my teeth cut the inside of my cheek. But this time, instead of apologizing, instead of crying, instead of asking what I'd done wrong, I stood up straight and looked at him with something I hadn't felt in 3 years. Rage. Pure, clean, righteous rage. That's the last time you'll ever hit me, I said, my voice deadly calm. Emeka blinked, taken aback by my tone. What did you say? You heard me. I walked past him toward our ensuite bathroom, feeling his shocked stare following me. That's the last time, Emeka. You can't threaten me in my own house, he called after me. I turned around in the bathroom doorway, meeting his eyes one final time. It's not a threat. It's a promise. I locked the bathroom door behind me and leaned against it, my whole body shaking. But it wasn't fear making me tremble, it was adrenaline. It was the rush of finally standing up for myself. As I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, at the fresh red mark on my face and the old bruises I'd been hiding, I made a decision that would change everything. I pulled out my phone and opened the camera app. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't cover the evidence. Instead, I documented it. Every mark, every bruise, every sign of what my marriage had become. Then I typed a message to my old university friend Kemi, who'd become a successful lawyer here in Lagos. I need your help. Can you meet me tomorrow? It's urgent. Her response came within minutes, of course. What do you need? I looked at myself in the mirror one more time, at this woman who'd been silent for too long, who'd accepted too much, who'd forgotten her own worth. A divorce attorney, I typed back. The best one you know. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more gripping stories like this. What do you think happens next? Comment below. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Kemi's law office in Victoria Island as I sat across from her, my hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had long gone cold. I'd barely slept after last night's confrontation, but for the first time in years, my sleeplessness wasn't from fear, it was from hope. "Show me again," Kemi said gently, her voice professional but caring. She was one of Lagos's most respected family lawyers, and seeing her in her crisp navy suit behind her mahogany desk, I felt like I was finally taking my life seriously. With trembling fingers, I unlocked my phone and showed her the photos I'd taken last night. The fresh handprint on my cheek, the fading bruises on my arms, the cut inside my mouth where my teeth had drawn blood. Kemi's jaw tightened as she scrolled through the images. "Adunni, how long has this been going on?" 3 years, I whispered, the words still feeling foreign on my tongue. I'd never said it out loud to anyone before. It started small, pushing, grabbing too hard during arguments. Then it escalated. "And you've never reported it?" I shook my head, shame burning in my chest. "You know how it is, Kemi. Who would believe me? Emeka is successful, respected. He's never done it in public, never where anyone could see. And his family." I trailed off. "His family what? They think I'm lucky to have him. A woman from my background, married to a petroleum engineer from a prominent family? They've made it clear that I should be grateful, no matter what." Kemi leaned forward, her eyes blazing with professional determination. "Adunni, listen to me carefully. What you've described is domestic violence. It's not discipline, it's not correction, it's a crime. And in Nigeria, we have laws to protect women like you." "But the children," I said, voicing my biggest fear. "Emeka will fight for custody. He has money, connections, lawyers. What if I lose them?" "That's exactly why we need to build a strong case," Kemi replied, pulling out a yellow legal pad. "Tell me everything. Every incident, every threat, every witness who might have seen something. We're going to document everything." For the next 2 hours, I poured out 3 years of hidden pain. I told her about the time Emeka threw a plate at my head because dinner was late, leaving a scar behind my left ear that I covered with my hair. I described the night he locked me out of the house in my nightgown because I'd questioned his decision to send Afani to an expensive boarding school without consulting me. "What about financial control?" Kemi asked, taking notes rapidly. "Complete," I admitted. "I have access to a household account for groceries and children's expenses, but he monitors every transaction. I haven't had my own bank account since we married." "Employment?" "He made me quit teaching when Uchenna was born. Said a wife's place was at home." The irony wasn't lost on me that I was now sitting in the office of my former university roommate who'd built a successful career while I'd been slowly erased. Kemi looked up from her notes. "Adunni, I need to ask you something difficult. Last night, did he force himself on you sexually?" The question hung in the air like a physical weight. I'd been dreading it, but I knew it was coming. "Not last night," I said quietly. "But, yes. Many times over the past year. He says it's his right as my husband." Kemi's pen stopped moving. In the silence that followed, I could hear the distant sounds of Lagos traffic through the office windows, the normal world continuing while mine was being dissected and examined. "That's marital rape, Adunni. It's a crime." The words hit me like a physical blow. Rape. I'd never allowed myself to think of it that way, had always found ways to minimize it, to tell myself it wasn't that bad, that it was just marriage. "I know this is overwhelming," Kemi continued gently. "But you need to understand the reality of your situation so we can fight it properly." I nodded, wiping away tears I hadn't realized were falling. "What do I do now?" "First, we file for a protection order. This will legally require Emeka to stay away from you and stop all forms of abuse. Then we begin divorce proceedings with a request for full custody of the children, alimony, and a fair division of marital assets. He'll never agree to any of that. He doesn't have to agree. That's what the courts are for. Kemi's smile was fierce. But Adunni, I need you to understand something. Once we file these papers, there's no going back. Emeka will likely become more dangerous, not less. Do you have somewhere safe to stay? I hadn't thought that far ahead. I know. The house, it's in both our names, but he'll make your life hell if you stay there. What about family? My parents died in a car accident 2 years ago. I have a sister in Ibadan, but Emeka doesn't allow me to visit her often. As I said it, I realized how completely isolated I'd become. Friends? I thought about my old teaching colleagues, the women from church, the neighbors I exchanged pleasantries with. How many of them knew the real state of my marriage? How many would actually help if I asked? I don't know, I admitted. Kemi reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. You have me. And I know other women who've been through this. You're not alone, even though he's made you feel that way. My phone buzzed with a text message. My blood went cold when I saw Emeka's name on the screen. Where are you? You weren't home when I left for work. The children are asking questions. I showed the message to Kemi, who frowned. He's already trying to control your movements. We need to move fast. I told him I was going shopping, I said, hating how automatically I'd learned to lie to avoid conflict. Adunni, from now on, you document everything. Every call, every text, every interaction. Keep a diary of incidents with dates and times. Take photos of any new injuries. And most importantly, she leaned forward, her expression serious. If you ever feel like you're in immediate danger, you call the police first, then you call me. Promise me. I promised, though the idea of calling the police on my husband still felt surreal. Another text came through, this one more aggressive. Answer me, Adunni. Where the hell are you? I should go, I said, standing up on shaky legs. If I'm not home by lunch, he'll be suspicious. Kemi handed me her business card and a small voice recorder. Keep this hidden. If he threatens you again, try to record it. Audio evidence is powerful in court. As I walked toward the door, she called my name. Adunni? I turned back. You're brave, she said simply. Braver than you know. Most women in your situation never make it to my office. The ride home through Lagos traffic gave me time to think, to panic, to second-guess everything. By the time I pulled into our driveway in Lekki, my resolve was wavering. This was my home, my life, my children's stability. Was I really ready to destroy all of it? But as I walked through our front door, I heard Emeka's voice from his study, loud and angry on a phone call. I don't care what it costs. I want those quarterly reports perfect, and if anyone in my department can't handle that, they can find another job. The same voice that had threatened me last night, that had called me worthless, that had demanded submission. But now, instead of automatically tensing up, I felt something else. Determination. I quietly made my way upstairs and hid the voice recorder in my jewelry box, then slipped Kemi's business card inside my copy of our marriage certificate, a irony that wasn't lost on me. When Emeka found me in the kitchen 20 minutes later, I was calmly preparing his lunch, just like always. Where were you this morning? He asked, his tone deceptively casual. Shopping for groceries, I replied without looking up from the cutting board. Show me the receipts. My knife paused mid-chop. In all our years of marriage, he'd never asked for receipts from grocery shopping. I went to 3 different stores. I didn't think to keep all the receipts. It was a weak lie, and we both knew it. But I watched his face carefully, noting the suspicion in his eyes, the way his jaw tightened. From now on, he said slowly, you keep every receipt. I want to know exactly where you go and what you spend. Of course, I said, returning to my chopping with steady hands. But what Emeka didn't know was that his increased control was exactly what Kemi had warned me about. And now I knew what it meant. It meant he was scared. And for the first time in 3 years, that knowledge made me smile. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more gripping stories like this. What do you think Emeka will do when he realizes Adani is building a case against him? Comment below. Mummy, why is Daddy searching through your things? Uchenna's innocent question hit me like a physical blow as I stood in our bedroom doorway, watching Emeka rifle through my dresser drawers with the intensity of a man possessed. It had been 4 days since my meeting with Kemi, 4 days of walking on eggshells while documenting every suspicious look, every controlling comment, every sign that my husband was spiraling into paranoia. Go to your room, baby, I said softly to my daughter, my heart breaking at the confusion in her 6-year-old eyes. Daddy and I need to talk. Emeka didn't even look up as our daughter reluctantly walked away. He was too busy pulling out my undergarments, shaking out my jewelry box, examining every corner of what used to be my private space. Where is it? He demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Where is what? I asked, though my pulse was racing. Had he somehow found Kemi's business card? The voice recorder? The small notebook where I'd been documenting incidents? Don't play stupid with me, Adani. He slammed the jewelry box down so hard that my grandmother's pearl earrings scattered across the dresser. I know you're hiding something. I forced myself to remain calm, remembering Kemi's advice. Document everything. Stay alert. Trust your instincts. Emeka, you're scaring the children, I said, stepping into the room and closing the door behind me. What exactly are you looking for? He turned to face me, his eyes wild with suspicion. In the 4 days since our bedroom confrontation, he'd lost weight, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. He looked like a man haunted by ghosts only he could see. Money, he said bluntly. I know you've been taking money from the household account. Small amounts, but consistently. Where is it going? My blood went cold. I had been taking money, 20,000 naira here, 15,000 there, building a small emergency fund that I kept hidden in an old tea tin in the pantry. It wasn't much, but it was my escape money, my lifeline. I don't know what you're talking about, I lied, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew he didn't believe them. The bank statements, Adani. He pulled a folder from his briefcase and threw it onto our bed. Every transaction for the past 6 months. ATM withdrawals that don't match your grocery receipts. Cash that just disappeared. I stared at the papers spread across our Egyptian cotton sheets, seeing my small acts of rebellion laid out in black and white. 300,000 naira total over 6 months. To him, it was pocket change. To me, it was freedom. The children needed things, I said, grasping for any explanation that might satisfy him. School supplies, clothes, medicine. What medicine? His voice sharpened. When was either of them sick? I was trapped, and we both knew it. In my desperation to build independence, I'd been careless, too focused on the goal to cover my tracks properly. I bought vitamins, I said weakly. And I wanted to surprise you with something nice for your birthday next month. The lie fell flat between us. Emeka's birthday wasn't for 3 months, and he knew I knew that. You're lying to me, he said, taking a step closer. My own wife is lying to my face. The hurt in his voice almost made me feel guilty. Almost. But then I remembered the bruises on my arms, the terror in my children's eyes, the way he'd forced himself on me just 2 nights ago while I stared at the ceiling and counted seconds until it was over. Why would I lie? I asked, injecting just enough confusion into my voice to sound genuine. Emeka, you're my husband. We're supposed to trust each other. It was a masterful manipulation, using his own words against him, appealing to his sense of marital authority while simultaneously planting doubt about his accusations. For a moment, it worked. I saw uncertainty flicker across his features. But then his phone rang. Emeka, it's Mom Ngozi. His mother's crisp voice filled the room as he answered on speaker. I need to speak with you about something important. What is it, Mama? It's about Adunni. My mother-in-law's tone was ice cold. I had tea with Mrs. Okafor yesterday. You remember, she's married to that lawyer friend of yours. She mentioned seeing Adunni at a law office in Victoria Island 3 days ago. The room went deadly silent. I felt the blood drain from my face as Emeka's eyes locked onto mine with the intensity of a predator who'd just cornered its prey. Which law office? His voice was barely above a whisper. Kemi Adebayo's firm. You know, that woman who handles divorces. The phone slipped from Emeka's hand, clattering onto the marble floor. But neither of us moved to pick it up. We just stared at each other across the wreckage of my carefully constructed lies. A divorce lawyer? His voice was so quiet it was terrifying. You went to see a divorce lawyer? I opened my mouth to deny it, to fabricate another story, but the words wouldn't come. In that moment, faced with absolute proof of my betrayal, something inside me snapped. Yes, I said simply. The admission hung in the air like a loaded gun. Emeka's face went through a series of emotions: shock, hurt, rage, and finally, something that looked almost like respect. You sneaky little bitch, he said, but there was no heat in it. If anything, he sounded almost impressed. All this time, playing the perfect submissive wife, and you were planning to leave me. I wasn't planning anything, I said, finding my voice. I was exploring my options. Your options? He laughed, but it was a cold, calculating sound. What options do you think you have, Adunni? You have no job, no money, no family support. I could destroy you in court. Maybe, I admitted. But I'm not the same woman you married 8 years ago. I'm not even the same woman you threatened 4 nights ago. What's that supposed to mean? I walked to my bedside table and pulled out my phone, opening the voice recording app. His eyes widened as he realized what I was doing. It means I'm not afraid of you anymore, I said clearly, making sure the recording captured every word. It means I'm documenting every threat, every bruise, every time you force yourself on me. It means your perfect reputation is about to become very, very public. The transformation in his face was immediate and terrifying. The uncertain, hurt husband disappeared, replaced by something cold and predatory. You recorded me? His voice was deadly quiet. I recorded everything. Your threats, your violence, your demands for sex when I said no. I have photos of every bruise, copies of every controlling text message. I have a paper trail of financial abuse and witness statements from people who've seen you humiliate me. It was partially a bluff. I had some evidence, but not nearly as much as I was claiming. But the look of pure panic that flashed across his face told me my gamble was working. You can't use any of that in court, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Watch me. We stood there in our bedroom, surrounded by the debris of our marriage, scattered jewelry, bank statements, the phone still transmitting his mother's increasingly frantic questions, and I realized this was the moment everything changed. This was the moment I stopped being a victim and started being a fighter. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through my veins. "You're going to leave this house for the weekend. You're going to give me space to think about our future without threats or intimidation. And you're going to start treating me with the respect I deserve. And if I don't..." I held up my phone, making sure he could see the recording app was still running. Then on Monday morning, my lawyer files everything. Divorce papers, restraining order, custody petition, and a very detailed account of our marriage that will be public record. The silence that followed was broken only by his mother's voice still squawking from the dropped phone. "You think you're so smart," Emeka said finally. "But you have no idea who you're dealing with. I built this life, this reputation, this family. I can destroy it all just to spite you." "Maybe," I said. "But you'll destroy yourself in the process. Is your pride really worth losing everything?" For a long moment, we just stared at each other. Then, without another word, Emeka picked up his phone and walked toward our closet. "Mama, I'll call you back," he said into the phone before hanging up. 20 minutes later, I watched from our bedroom window as he loaded a suitcase into his Mercedes and drove away. Only then did I allow myself to collapse onto our bed, my whole body shaking with adrenaline and terror and something that might have been triumph. I had just declared war on my husband. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt like I might actually win. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more gripping stories like this. Do you think Adunni made the right choice, or has she just made herself more dangerous? Comment below what you think Emeka will do next. The silence in our house felt like a living thing, breathing in the spaces where Emeka's anger used to echo. It had been 2 days since he'd left, and I was learning what peace felt like again. But as I sat in our living room, watching Afani and Uchenna play without constantly looking over their shoulders, I knew this calm was temporary. My phone buzzed with another message from him. The 15th one since yesterday. "This is ridiculous, Adunni. I'm coming home tonight. We need to talk like adults." I deleted it without responding, just like I deleted all the others. Let him think I was ignoring him out of spite. The truth was, I was busy building the strongest case possible with the time he'd given me. "Mummy," Uchenna climbed onto the sofa beside me, her small body curling against mine. "Is Daddy coming home today?" The question broke my heart. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that her father's absence is actually a gift? That for the first time in years, Mommy isn't walking around with bruises hidden under her clothes? "I don't know, baby," I said honestly, stroking her hair. "How do you feel when Daddy's not here?" She was quiet for a long moment, then whispered, "It's more quiet. But good quiet. Good quiet." My 6-year-old daughter had learned the difference between peaceful silence and the terrifying quiet that comes before an explosion. That realization made me more determined than ever to protect her from growing up thinking this was normal. "Afani," I called to my 8-year-old son, who was building something elaborate with his Lego blocks. "Come here for a minute." He approached cautiously, and I noticed he was walking the way he always did when his father was home, carefully, quietly, as if making noise might trigger something dangerous. "Sit with us," I said gently. "I want to ask you something." Both children settled on either side of me, and I took a deep breath. What I was about to do went against everything I'd been taught about protecting children from adult problems, but I needed to know what they'd witnessed. "You know how sometimes Daddy and I argue?" I began carefully. Afani nodded solemnly. "You argue a lot. Do you ever see Daddy hurt Mommy during those arguments?" The question hung in the air like a physical presence. Uchenna's small body tensed against mine, while Afani's eyes darted toward the hallway as if checking to make sure his father wasn't lurking there. Sometimes Daddy gets very angry, Afani said slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. And sometimes you cry after. Do you see him hit me? I pressed gently, hating myself for putting them through this but knowing I needed their potential testimony. One time, Uchenna said in a tiny voice. I came downstairs for water, and Daddy pushed you. You fell down. I remembered that night. 3 months ago, I'd questioned Emeka's decision to withdraw Afani from his football team without consulting me. He'd shoved me so hard I'd hit the marble floor of our kitchen, splitting my lip and bruising my hip. I'd thought the children were asleep. I'm sorry you saw that, baby, I said, pulling her closer. That wasn't your fault, and it wasn't okay. Is that why Daddy went away? Afani asked. Because he hurt you? Before I could answer, my phone rang. Not a text this time, an actual call from Emeka. I glanced at the children, then made a decision that would have been unthinkable a week ago. I answered and put it on speaker. Adunni, enough of this childish behavior, Emeka's voice filled our living room. I'm coming home tonight, and we're going to resolve this situation. No, I said simply, watching my children's faces as they heard their father's angry tone. You're not. What do you mean, no? It's my house too. It's my house too, I replied, keeping my voice calm and steady. And right now, I need space. The children need space. The children need their father. The children need safety, I said, looking directly at Afani and Uchenna as I spoke. They need to live in a home where people don't hurt each other. There was a long pause, and when Emeka spoke again, his voice was different, softer, more manipulative. Adunni, I know I've made mistakes. But we can work through this. We're a family. Don't you remember how happy we used to be? It was a trap, an attempt to trigger my guilt and nostalgia. The old me would have fallen for it, would have started remembering the good times and convincing myself that maybe things could change. But the old me hadn't spent 2 hours yesterday with Kemi, going over the legal documents that would change my life forever. I remember, I said quietly. I also remember the first time you called me stupid. I remember the first time you grabbed me hard enough to leave bruises. I remember the first time you forced yourself on me when I said I wasn't ready. Do you remember those things, Emeka? The silence on the other end was deafening. I could practically hear him calculating how much the children had just learned about their parents' marriage. We shouldn't discuss this in front of the children, he said finally. No, we shouldn't, I agreed. Which is why you're going to stay wherever you've been staying until we can have this conversation through lawyers. Lawyers? His voice sharpened. Adunni, if you think you can threaten me with some divorce lawyer. I'm not threatening you, I interrupted. I'm informing you. The papers will be served on Monday. I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking slightly. But when I looked at my children, I saw something in their faces that gave me strength. Relief. Are you and Daddy getting divorced? Afani asked, his 8-year-old mind cutting straight to the heart of the matter. I don't know yet, I answered honestly. But things are going to change. Daddy is going to have to learn to treat people better, especially Mommy. Will we still see him? Uchenna asked. Of course, baby. He's your father, and he loves you very much. But sometimes people who love each other can't live together anymore. It was a simplified explanation, but it was honest. And honesty, I was learning, was something my children had been starved of for too long. That evening, after the children were in bed, I made 2 phone calls that would have been impossible a week ago. The first was to my sister Funk in Abaddon. "A dunny?" Her voice was surprised. "Is everything okay? You never call this late." "I'm leaving Emeka," I said without preamble. "I need you to know, in case something happens to me." The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "Funk? Are you there?" "I'm here," she said, and I could hear tears in her voice. "Oh, a dunny. I've been waiting for this call for 3 years." "You knew?" "I suspected. The way you changed, how you stopped visiting, how nervous you got whenever he was around. But you seemed so determined to make it work." "I was trying to be a good wife," I said, the words tasting bitter now. "A good wife doesn't have to endure abuse," Funk said firmly. "Do you need somewhere to stay? You and the children can come here." "Not yet. But maybe soon." The second call was to Kemi. "Everything's ready," she told me. "Protection order, divorce petition, custody filing. Are you absolutely sure you want to do this?" I looked around our beautiful house, the imported furniture, the expensive artwork, the marble floors that had never quite lost the stain from my blood after that night 3 months ago. "I'm sure," I said. "A dunny, there's something I need to tell you. I've been making some inquiries about Emeka's finances." "What kind of inquiries?" "The kind that suggest your husband may not be as financially stable as he appears. There are some irregularities in his company accounts, some investments that have gone very bad. I think your divorce filing might be coming at a very inconvenient time for him." My blood went cold. "What does that mean?" "It means he's going to fight this with everything he has. Not just because of his ego, but because he literally can't afford to lose half his assets right now." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of what I was about to unleash. "It doesn't matter," I said finally. "I'd rather be poor and safe than rich and terrified." "Good," Kemi said. "Because Monday morning, we go to war." After I hung up, I walked through our house one more time, seeing it with new eyes. This wasn't my home anymore. It was evidence. Every room held memories of fear, control, and violence disguised as love. As I prepared for bed in the master bedroom that I'd have to myself for one more night, I heard a car pulling into our driveway. My heart stopped. Emeka was home. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more gripping stories like this. Will a dunny stand her ground, or will Emeka's return change everything? Comment below what you think she should do. I heard his key in the lock at exactly 11:47 p.m. I know because I was staring at the digital clock beside our bed, my heart hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. Every instinct screamed at me to pretend to be asleep, to avoid the confrontation that was coming. But the old Adunni would have done that. The old Adunni would have cowered under the covers and hoped he was too tired to be angry. The new Adunni sat up in bed, turned on the bedside lamp, and waited. His footsteps on the marble stairs were deliberate, controlled. Not the stumbling of a drunk man or the hurried pace of someone coming home in passion. These were the measured steps of a man who had spent 2 days planning exactly what he was going to say and do. When our bedroom door opened, I was shocked by what I saw. Emeka looked terrible. His usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, his expensive shirt wrinkled, dark circles under his bloodshot eyes. But it was the expression on his face that made my blood run cold. I'd seen him angry before, had endured his rage countless times. This was different. This was the look of a desperate man with nothing left to lose. "So you're awake," he said, his voice eerily calm as he closed the door behind him. "Good. We need to talk." "I told you not to come back tonight," I said, grateful that my voice didn't shake. "The children are sleeping." "The children?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Yes, let's talk about the children. Let's talk about how you're planning to destroy their family because you've been listening to some feminist lawyer who's filled your head with nonsense. Kemi didn't fill my head with anything, I replied, sitting straighter in bed. She just helped me understand that what you've been doing to me has a name. It's called domestic violence. He moved closer to the bed, and I instinctively reached for my phone on the nightstand. His eyes caught the movement, and his expression darkened. Planning to record me again? He asked. That's very clever, Adunni. Very sneaky. But do you know what I've been doing for the past 2 days while you've been playing house with our children? I didn't answer, but I pressed the record button on my phone anyway. I've been talking to my own lawyers, he continued, beginning to pace at the foot of our bed like a caged animal. Do you know what they told me? They told me that a wife who tries to destroy her husband's reputation with false accusations of abuse can lose custody of her children. They're not false accusations, I said quietly. Prove it. He stopped pacing and stared at me with those cold, calculating eyes. You have some photos of bruises that could have come from anywhere. You have some recordings of normal marital disagreements. But what you don't have, Adunni, is any witnesses who will testify against me. My stomach dropped. He was right, and we both knew it. His family would never testify against him. Our friends were really his friends. The neighbors had never seen anything. It would be my word against his, and he was a respected petroleum engineer from a prominent family while I was just a former primary school teacher with no independent income. But I have something you don't, he continued, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. I have money. I have connections. I have the ability to drag this case out for years, to make your life so miserable that you'll beg me to take you back. And what about your financial problems? I asked, playing the card Kemi had given me. What about those irregularities in your company accounts? The change in his face was immediate and terrifying. The calculated calm cracked, revealing pure panic underneath. Who told you about that? His voice was barely above a whisper. Does it matter? I know about the missing money, Emeka. I know about the investments that went bad. I know you can't afford a messy divorce right now because you're already in trouble. He lunged forward so fast I didn't have time to react. His hands grabbed the front of my nightgown, dragging me to the edge of the bed until we were face to face. You know nothing, he hissed, his breath hot against my cheek. You understand nothing about the pressure I'm under, the responsibilities I carry. Everything I've done has been for this family, for you and the children. Stealing money was for the family? I managed to gasp out, even though his grip was making it hard to breathe. His hands tightened. I didn't steal anything. I made some investments that didn't work out. I borrowed against company funds temporarily. It's all perfectly legal. Is that why you're so desperate to avoid a divorce? Because you need my signature on documents? Because you need to maintain the appearance of a stable marriage while you fix your mess? The look in his eyes confirmed what I'd suspected. This wasn't just about his ego or his control over me. This was about his entire life falling apart, and I was the only thing standing between him and complete ruin. Please, he said, and for the first time in years, I heard genuine desperation in his voice. Please, Adunni. Don't do this. Don't file those papers. Give me 6 months to sort everything out, and then if you still want to leave. If I still want to leave? I pulled back as far as his grip would allow. Emeka, you've been hitting me for 3 years. You've been raping me. You've been controlling every aspect of my life. And now you want me to stay quiet for 6 more months so you can avoid going to prison? It's not prison, he said quickly. It's just complicated business matters. And I never raped you. You're my wife. Being your wife doesn't give you the right to force me. Everything I did was within my rights as your husband. The words hung in the air between us, and I realized something that should have terrified me but instead filled me with an odd sense of peace. He truly believed what he was saying. In his mind, marriage gave him ownership over my body, my choices, my very existence. He wasn't evil, he was worse. He was a man who had never once questioned whether what he was doing was wrong. Let go of me, I said quietly. Not until you promise me you won't file those papers. Let go of me, or I start screaming and wake up the children. His grip loosened slightly. You wouldn't. Try me. We stared at each other in the soft lamplight of our bedroom, and I saw the exact moment he realized I meant it. The exact moment he understood that the woman he'd spent 3 years breaking had somehow become unbreakable. He released me and stepped back, his hands shaking. You don't understand what you're doing, he said, his voice cracking. If this all comes out, if there's an investigation, it won't just destroy me. It will destroy the children too. They'll lose their home, their school, their entire way of life. They'll lose their father's reputation, I corrected. But they'll gain something more important. They'll learn that no one has the right to hurt the people they love. The children love me. The children are terrified of you, I said, the truth falling between us like a physical blow. Just like I've been terrified of you. He sank into the chair beside our dresser, suddenly looking every one of his 37 years. What do you want from me, a dunny? What will it take to make this go away? For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. He looked so lost, so broken. But then I remembered Uchenna saying good quiet when describing his absence. I remembered Afani walking carefully through our house as if he might trigger an explosion. I remembered 3 years of covering bruises and making excuses and pretending that this was what love looked like. I want you to get help, I said finally. Real help. Therapy, anger management, whatever it takes to figure out why you think it's acceptable to hurt people. And if I do that? If I get help? Then maybe someday you can be the father our children deserve. But Emeka. I paused, making sure he was looking directly at me. I will never be your wife again. That part of our story is over. The silence that followed was broken only by the distant sound of Lagos traffic and the gentle hum of our air conditioning. When he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet I almost didn't hear him. I loved you, you know. I still love you. No, I said, and for the first time in years, I felt completely certain about something. You loved controlling me. You loved having someone to blame for your problems, someone to take your anger out on. But you never loved me, Emeka. Because love doesn't leave bruises. He stood up slowly, and for a terrifying moment, I thought he might try to hurt me one last time. Instead, he walked to our closet and began pulling out more clothes. The papers will be served Monday, he asked without turning around. Yes. And you won't change your mind? No. He nodded, stuffing shirts into his suitcase with shaking hands. Then I guess there's nothing left to say. But as he reached the bedroom door, he turned back one final time. You think you're so strong now, he said, his voice filled with a bitterness I'd never heard before. But you have no idea how cruel the world can be to women who think they don't need protection. When this is all over, when you're struggling to pay rent in some tiny apartment while I rebuild my life, remember that you chose this. Yes, I said, meeting his eyes without flinching. I did choose this. And I choose it again, every single day. After he left, I sat in our bed for a long time, listening to the sound of his car driving away. Then I picked up my phone and typed a simple message to Kemi. He knows everything. But I'm ready. File the papers. Her response came within minutes. You're braver than you know. See you Monday. As I turned off the light and settled back into bed, I realized something that filled me with wonder. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more gripping stories like this. What do you think will happen when the divorce papers are served? Will Emeka go quietly, or will he fight back? Comment below. The knock came at exactly 9:15 a.m. on Monday morning, just as I was serving breakfast to Afani and Uchenna. Through our front window, I could see a man in a crisp suit holding an official-looking envelope, and my heart started racing with anticipation rather than fear. Mummy, who's at the door? Uchenna asked, looking up from her bowl of cereal. Someone with important papers, I said, walking to answer it on legs that felt surprisingly steady. Mrs. Adunni Okoro, the process server asked politely. Yes. I have documents to serve to your husband, Mr. Emeka Okoro. Is he available? He doesn't live here anymore, I said, and saying it out loud made it feel more real. But I can give you his office address. 20 minutes later, as I watched the children board their school bus, my phone started ringing. I didn't need to look at the caller ID to know who it was. You did it! Emeka's voice was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. You actually did it! Do you have any idea what you've just done? Yes, I said calmly, walking back into our house and locking the door behind me. I protected myself and my children. Protected? He was screaming now, completely unhinged. You just served me with divorce papers at my office. In front of my colleagues. In front of my boss. I hadn't planned for that, but I couldn't say I was sorry about it. Let his professional world see exactly what kind of man he really was. People are asking questions, Adunni. Questions about why my wife would file for divorce citing abuse. Do you understand what this does to my reputation? Your reputation was built on lies anyway, I replied, surprising myself with how little sympathy I felt for his embarrassment. This isn't over, he said, his voice dropping to that dangerous whisper I knew so well. You think you're so clever with your lawyers and your recordings, but I know things about you too. I know about that money you've been stealing. I know about. I hung up on him. The phone immediately started ringing again, but this time I turned it off completely. I had more important things to do than listen to his threats. By 11 a.m., I was sitting across from Kemi in her office, watching her review the protection order that had been granted along with the divorce filing. This is excellent, she said, looking up from the documents with satisfaction. Emergency custody granted pending investigation, protection order issued immediately, and the judge fast-tracked the hearing because of the documented evidence of abuse. What does that mean exactly? It means Emeka can't come within 500 meters of you or the children until after the custody hearing. It means he can't contact you except through lawyers. And it means he has to continue paying all household expenses while this gets sorted out. Relief flooded through me so powerfully that I started crying. Not tears of sadness or fear, but tears of pure, overwhelming relief. There's more good news, Kemi continued. Remember those financial irregularities I mentioned? My investigator found something very interesting. She slid a folder across her desk. Inside were bank statements, investment records, and what looked like company documents. Emeka has been embezzling from his company for over a year, she explained. Small amounts at first, then larger sums. He's been using the money to cover losses from some very bad cryptocurrency investments. My hands shook as I flipped through the evidence. How much? Approximately 15 million naira. And the company is starting to notice. What does this mean for our divorce? It means your husband is about to face criminal charges that have nothing to do with your marriage. It also means he's in no position to fight you for custody or assets. I stared at the documents, thinking about Saturday night when he'd begged me not to file the papers, when he claimed he just needed 6 months to sort things out. He knew, I said quietly. He knew this was coming, and he thought staying married to me would somehow protect him or give him more time. Probably. A man facing embezzlement charges looks more sympathetic if he has a stable family life. But Adani. Kemi's expression grew serious. Men like Emeka don't give up easily. Especially when they're facing the loss of everything they think defines them. You need to be very careful. As if summoned by her words, my phone, which I turned back on, began buzzing with notifications. Text after text from Emeka, each one more desperate and angry than the last. How could you do this to me? I gave you everything. The children will hate you for destroying their family. You're nothing without me, Adani. Nothing. I'll make sure you never see a naira of my money. You think you've won, but this is just the beginning. I showed the messages to Kemi, who immediately began taking screenshots. These are violations of the protection order, she said grimly. He's not supposed to contact you at all. But the messages kept coming, and they were getting worse. I know where you hide your emergency money. I know about every lie you've told. I know how to hurt you where it counts. That one made my blood run cold. What did he mean, where it counts? My phone rang, and this time it wasn't Emeka. It was the children's school. Mrs. Okoro? This is Principal Adebayo. I'm calling because your husband just tried to pick up Afani and Uchenna from school. What? I shot to my feet. Did you let them go with him? No, ma'am. We have strict instructions that only you are authorized for pickup. But he became very aggressive when we refused. We had to call security. Thank you, I said, grabbing my purse. I'm coming to get them right now. Mrs. Okoro? Your husband mentioned something about taking them to see their grandmother. He seemed to think he had the right to do that. I hung up and turned to Kemi, panic rising in my chest. He tried to take the children from school. That's kidnapping, she said, already reaching for her phone. I'm calling the police. The drive to the children's school felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. Every scenario ran through my mind. What if he was waiting there? What if he'd found another way to take them? What if I was too late? But when I arrived, Afani and Uchenna were safe in the principal's office, though both looked shaken. Daddy was very angry, Uchenna whispered as I hugged her tight. He said we were coming with him whether we wanted to or not. But we said no, Afani added, his 8-year-old voice trying to sound brave. We said we wanted to stay at school until Mummy came. My heart broke and swelled with pride at the same time. My children had stood up to their father. They had chosen safety over fear. You did exactly the right thing, I told them. You're both so brave. As we drove home, I made a decision that I knew would change everything. We're not going home today, I announced. We're going on a little adventure. Where? Uchenna asked. To Aunt Funk's house in Ibadan. Would you like that? Both children cheered, and for the first time in days, I saw genuine happiness on their faces. I called Funk from the car. We're coming to stay with you. Today. Now. What happened? He tried to take the children from school. I don't think it's safe here anymore. Come, she said immediately. Come right now. I'll have everything ready. As we drove toward Ibadan, leaving Lagos and Emeka and our old life behind, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Freedom. My phone buzzed one last time with a message from Emeka: "You can run, but you can't hide forever. I will find you. I will get my children back. And when I do, you'll pay for everything you've done to me." I showed the message to Afani, who was old enough to read it. "Daddy's still angry," he observed. "Yes, he is. But anger can't hurt us anymore, because we're not going to be where his anger is." "Are we ever going home?" Uchenna asked. I looked in the rearview mirror at my two beautiful children, finally relaxed and chattering excitedly about seeing their aunt, and I realized something profound. "We are going home, baby," I said. "We're going to the place where people love us without hurting us." And for the first time in 3 years, that felt like the absolute truth. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more gripping stories like this. Do you think Adunni made the right choice leaving Lagos? What will Emeka do when he realizes they're gone? Comment below. Funk's house in Ibadan felt like stepping into another world. The modest 3-bedroom home with its garden full of hibiscus flowers and the sound of children playing in the street was everything our Lekki mansion wasn't: warm, genuine, peaceful. For the first time in years, I watched my children run freely without constantly checking over their shoulders. It had been 5 days since we'd arrived, and slowly, I was beginning to remember who I used to be before Emeka's control consumed my identity. "You look different," Funk observed as we sat on her front porch, watching Afani and Uchenna play football with the neighborhood children. "Lighter somehow." "I feel like I can breathe again," I admitted. "The children are sleeping through the night for the first time in months." It was true. No more nightmares, no more waking up when they heard raised voices from our bedroom, no more tiptoeing around the house afraid to make noise. My phone, which I'd kept turned off for most of the week, buzzed with a call from Kemi. I'd been dreading this conversation but knew it was necessary. "Adunni, where are you?" she asked immediately. "Somewhere safe." "What's happened?" "Emeka's been arrested." The words hit me like a physical blow. Even though I'd known this was coming, hearing it made everything suddenly real. The embezzlement charges? Among other things. The company filed a formal complaint yesterday, and the police also charged him with violating the protection order and attempted kidnapping for what he did at the school. I closed my eyes, feeling a mixture of relief and unexpected sadness. This was the man I'd once loved, the father of my children, now facing criminal charges. "There's more," Kemi continued. "He's been telling anyone who will listen that you kidnapped the children. He's trying to paint himself as the victim." "Can he do that? Can he have me arrested?" "Not based on what I've seen. You have full legal custody right now, and you're protecting your children from a man who violated a court order. But Adunni, he's not giving up. His mother posted his bail this morning." My blood went cold. "He's out?" "Yes, and he's furious. The word I'm getting is that he's hired a very expensive lawyer and plans to fight this with everything he has. He's claiming the embezzlement charges are false, that you somehow set him up, and that the abuse allegations are lies you're using to steal his children and his money." I thought about the Emeka I'd confronted in our bedroom a week ago, desperate and dangerous. Now he was facing public humiliation, criminal charges, and the loss of everything he'd built his identity around. What do we do? The custody hearing is scheduled for next Friday. You need to be there, and you need to be prepared for him to have a very different story than the one you're telling. After I hung up, I sat on Funk's porch for a long time, watching my children laugh with a freedom they'd never had in Lagos. How could I take them back to face their father in court? How could I subject them to his manipulation and lies? But even as I asked myself these questions, I knew the answer. Running away hadn't solved anything, it had just bought us time. If I wanted permanent safety for my children, I had to finish what I'd started. That evening, as we sat around Funk's small dining table sharing a simple meal of rice and stew, my phone rang. Unknown number. Don't answer it, Funk warned, but something made me pick up. A dunny. Mom Ngozie's crisp voice filled the room. We need to talk. I don't think that's a good idea. My son is in jail because of you, she continued as if I hadn't spoken. My grandchildren have been taken from their home, their school, their entire life. This madness has to stop. Your son put himself in jail by embezzling money and violating a court order, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. Those charges are ridiculous. Emeka is a respected engineer, a good father, a provider. You've destroyed his reputation with your lies. They're not lies. Prove it. The challenge in her voice was unmistakable. If you're so certain about what you're claiming, prove it in court. Face him properly, not from whatever hole you're hiding in. The accusation stung because part of it was true. I was hiding. But I was hiding to protect my children, not from cowardice. I'll see you in court on Friday, I said. Good. And a dunny? When this is over, when the judge sees through your manipulation, I'll make sure you never see those children again. She hung up, leaving me shaking with anger and determination. What did she say? Funk asked, concern written across her face. She dared me to prove my case in court. And I'm going to do exactly that. The next morning, I made several phone calls that would have been impossible for the old Adunni. I called my former colleagues at the primary school where I taught, asking them to write character references. I called our family doctor, asking for medical records that might document suspicious injuries. I even called Mrs. Okafor, our neighbor, asking if she'd ever noticed anything unusual about our marriage. Oh, my dear, Mrs. Okafor said sadly. I've been hoping someone would ask me that question for years. The walls between our houses are not as thick as you might think. Each conversation built my confidence and strengthened my case. I wasn't just a bitter wife making accusations, I was a woman with evidence, witnesses, and the truth on my side. But it was Afani who gave me the final piece I needed. Mummy, he said as we walked through Funk's neighborhood that evening, when we go back to court, will I have to see Daddy? Maybe, baby. How do you feel about that? He was quiet for a long moment, kicking at a small stone as we walked. I love Daddy, he said finally. But I don't want him to hurt you anymore. And I don't want Uchenna to be scared all the time. Would you be willing to tell a judge that? To help keep us all safe? He nodded solemnly, looking far older than his 8 years. If it helps you, Mummy, I'll tell them everything. That night, I called Kemi one last time. We're coming back to Lagos, I told her. All of us. And we're going to win this case. Are you sure? You could fight this from Ibadan, keep the children safe. No, I interrupted. I'm done running. I'm done hiding. I'm done letting him control my life even from a distance. We're coming home to face this properly. Then we'd better make sure we're ready for war, Kemi said. Because that's exactly what this is going to be. As I packed our few belongings that night, I found myself thinking about the woman I'd been a month ago, terrified, isolated, convinced she deserved whatever happened to her. That woman felt like a stranger now. Tomorrow, we would return to Lagos. In 3 days, I would face Emeka in court with our children's future hanging in the balance. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I was ready to fight. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more gripping stories like this. Will Adunni's courage be enough to win in court against Emeka's expensive lawyers? What will happen when they face each other again? Comment below your predictions. The Lagos family court felt like a cathedral of justice as I walked through its doors that Friday morning, my hand firmly holding Uchenna's while Afani walked bravely beside me. The marble floors echoed with our footsteps, and despite the butterflies in my stomach, I held my head high. I had spent 3 years learning to make myself small, invisible, silent. Today, I would speak my truth loud enough for the whole world to hear. Emeka was already seated at the defendant's table with his expensive lawyer, a man in a perfectly tailored suit who looked like he charged more per hour than I used to earn in a month as a teacher. Emeka himself looked thinner, older, but when our eyes met across the courtroom, I saw the same calculating coldness that had controlled my life for so long. Behind him sat Mama Ngozi and his sisters, all dressed in matching white outfits as if they were attending a funeral. In a way, I suppose they were the funeral of the lie they'd all been living about what kind of man Emeka really was. All rise for the Honorable Judge Adebayo, the bailiff called. Judge Adebayo was a woman in her 50s with kind but sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. As she took her seat, I felt a surge of hope. A woman judge might understand things that others would miss. This is a custody hearing in the matter of Okoro versus Okoro, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the courtroom. I've reviewed the preliminary evidence, and I have some serious concerns about the welfare of the minor children involved. Emeka's lawyer, Mr. Adeyemi, stood immediately. Your Honor, my client has been the victim of false accusations designed to destroy his reputation and steal his children. Mrs. Okoro has shown a pattern of deception and manipulation that makes her unfit for custody. Your Honor, Kemi responded, standing with quiet authority, Mrs. Okoro has been the victim of systematic domestic violence for 3 years. She has documentation, witnesses, and physical evidence to support her claims. I want to hear from both parties, Judge Adebayo said. Mr. Okoro, you may begin. Emeka stood, and for a moment, he looked like the confident, successful man I'd married 8 years ago. But when he began to speak, his desperation showed through. Your Honor, I love my wife and children more than anything in this world. Yes, we've had marital problems, what couple doesn't? But I have never, ever abused my family. Adunni has been influenced by radical lawyers who have convinced her that normal marital disagreements constitute abuse. He gestured toward me with practiced emotion. I work hard to provide for my family. I built us a beautiful home, sent my children to the best schools, gave my wife everything she could want. In return, she's trying to destroy me with lies. What about the embezzlement charges? Judge Adebayo asked pointedly. Mr. Adeyemi jumped up. Those charges are completely separate from this custody matter, Your Honor. My client maintains his innocence and will fight them vigorously. But they speak to character, the judge replied. Continue, Mr. Okoro. Emeka's composure cracked slightly. Your Honor, my wife kidnapped my children. She took them from their home, their school, their entire life, and hid them in another state. What kind of mother does that? The kind who's protecting her children from a man who tried to take them from school against a court order, Kemi interjected. Objection sustained, Judge Adebayo said. Mrs. Okoro, I'd like to hear from you now. I stood on legs that felt stronger than they had in years. This was it, my moment to speak the truth that had been silenced for so long. Your Honor, for 3 years, I lived in fear. Fear of saying the wrong thing, wearing the wrong clothes, cooking the wrong meal, breathing too loudly. My husband controlled every aspect of my life, my money, my friends, my body. I pulled out my phone and showed the photos I'd taken that night in our bathroom. These are the bruises he gave me the last night we lived together. But the physical wounds weren't the worst part. The worst part was watching my children learn that this was normal. That love looked like fear. Your Honor, Mr. Adeyemi interrupted, anyone can claim bruises came from domestic violence. Where are the police reports? Where are the witnesses? Right here, I said, my voice growing stronger. Mrs. Okafor? Our neighbor stood from the gallery, her face grave but determined. Your Honor, I live next door to the Okoros. The walls are thin. I heard the shouting, the crying, the sounds of violence. I saw Mrs. Okoro with unexplained injuries. I witnessed her fear. One by one, my witnesses testified. Dr. Balogun, our family physician, spoke about the suspicious injuries I'd brought the children in for, injuries that Emeka had always explained as accidents. My former teaching colleague spoke about the change in my personality after marriage, how I'd become withdrawn and nervous. But it was when the judge asked to speak with Ifeanyi that the real truth came out. My 8-year-old son stood in the witness box, looking small but brave in his school uniform. Ifeanyi, Judge Adebayo said gently, can you tell me about your home life? Sometimes Daddy gets very angry, he said in his clear, young voice. And when he gets angry, Mommy gets hurt. Have you seen your father hurt your mother? Ifeanyi nodded. He pushes her. And sometimes he hits her. And Mommy cries, but she tries to hide it from us. Emeka shot to his feet. Your Honor, children can be coached. Sit down, Mr. Okoro, the judge said sharply. Continue, Ifeanyi. I love my daddy, my son said, and my heart broke at the conflict in his voice. But I don't want him to hurt Mommy anymore. And I don't want Uchenna to be scared all the time. How do you feel when you're with your mother? Safe, he said immediately. When we're with Mommy, we feel safe. The courtroom was silent as my son returned to his seat beside me. I saw several people in the gallery wiping their eyes, including Judge Adebayo. I've heard enough, the judge said. But before I make my ruling, I want to address something Mr. Okoro said about providing for his family. She picked up a folder from her desk. Mr. Okoro, are you aware that your company has filed criminal charges against you for embezzling over 15 million naira? Emeka's face went white. Your Honor, those charges are. Are you aware that much of this money was used to cover gambling debts and failed investments? I was going to pay it back. Are you aware that your family's beautiful home, the one you claim to have built for them, is about to be seized by the bank because you've been using mortgage payments to cover your illegal activities? The courtroom erupted in murmurs. I stared at Emeka in shock. Our home was being seized? How long had he been stealing to maintain our lifestyle? So when you talk about providing for your family, Judge Adebayo continued, what you actually mean is that you've been stealing money to maintain an illusion while abusing your wife and traumatizing your children. Emeka slumped in his chair, all his arrogance finally stripped away. This is my ruling, the judge said, her voice ringing with authority. Full custody of the minor children is awarded to Mrs. Adunni Okoro. Mr. Emeka Okoro will have supervised visitation rights only, contingent on completing anger management and domestic violence counseling. Relief flooded through me so powerfully that I nearly collapsed. Furthermore, the judge continued, Mrs. Okoro is awarded alimony and child support to be paid from Mr. Okoro's remaining legitimate assets. The protection order remains in effect indefinitely. As we stood to leave, Emeka caught my arm. For a moment, I tensed, expecting anger or threats. Instead, I saw something I'd never seen in his eyes before. Defeat. I never meant for it to go this far, he whispered. I loved you, Adunni. I still love you. I looked at this man who had controlled my life for so long, who had made me forget my own worth, who had taught my children that love meant fear. No, Emeka, I said quietly but firmly. You loved owning me. But love doesn't own. Love doesn't control. Love doesn't hurt. I turned away from him and walked toward my children, toward Kemi, toward my future. 6 months later, I stood in the doorway of our new apartment in Ibadan, small, simple, but ours. Ifani and Uchenna were thriving in their new school, making friends, laughing freely. I had returned to teaching and was working on my master's degree in education. Emeka was serving an 18-month sentence for embezzlement. His visits with the children were brief and supervised, and gradually, they were building a healthier relationship with their father, one based on respect rather than fear. The other day, Uchenna asked me if I ever missed our big house in Lagos. No, baby, I told her. A house is just a building. A home is where people love you without hurting you. She smiled and went back to her homework, and I realized something profound. We had lost a mansion, but we had gained our lives. We had lost luxury, but we had gained safety. We had lost the appearance of a perfect family, but we had gained the reality of genuine love. And as I watched my children growing up free from fear, I knew with absolute certainty that it was the best trade I'd ever made. Sometimes the greatest strength isn't in staying and enduring. Sometimes the greatest strength is in having the courage to walk away. And sometimes, walking away is the only way to finally come home. The end. Thank you for joining us for this powerful story of courage, survival, and hope. If this story resonated with you, please remember that no one deserves to live in fear. Help is available. Love should never hurt. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more inspiring stories of strength and justice. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and let us know in the comments what you learned from Aduni's journey.
Husband beats and humiliated wife every day until their 5-year-old son did the unthinkable. Hello viewers, welcome back. Before I proceed, please kindly hit the subscribe button, like and share this video to your loved ones. Now to my story. The house looked neat from the outside, a pleasant brick home in a quiet American suburb, but behind closed doors it was a chamber of fear. Sarah Mitchell had long since stopped believing in the sanctity of marriage. Each day felt like a new rehearsal of pain. Daniel Mitchell, her husband, carried himself in public as a charming, successful man. Neighbors waved at him. Co-workers admired his discipline, and even the pastor at their church often praised his devotion to family. Only Sarah and the children knew the darker truth. His devotion was to control, not love. Daniel's anger showed itself in unpredictable waves. A misplaced glass, a meal not hot enough, or simply the sound of laughter from Grace or Oliver could ignite his fury. His voice would rise first, sharp like glass shattering in the air, and then came the fists. Sarah had learned to take the blows silently, shielding her children with her body whenever she could, praying that the storm would pass quickly. Grace, at only 8 years old, had already become too wise for her age. She would quietly guide her little brother into a corner, whispering stories to distract him as their father's shadow loomed over their mother. Oliver, just 5, didn't understand the depth of what was happening, but he felt the terror in his bones. His small hands clutched his sister's whenever Daniel raised his voice, his little eyes wide with dread. The house carried an atmosphere of constant tension. The children tiptoed around their father, speaking in hushed tones, avoiding eye contact whenever possible. Sarah learned the rhythm of Daniel's moods. He was calmer after a few drinks, cruelest when sober, and dangerously unpredictable when stressed. No matter how she planned, she could never predict when the next blow would land. Sometimes, she would catch herself staring at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, the bruises darkening across her face. She had become a stranger to herself, her once bright smile now a faint memory. Yet she kept going, because she feared that leaving might make things worse. Daniel had threatened her countless times. "If you ever try to run, Sarah, I'll make sure you never see the kids again." Those words echoed louder in her mind than the bruises on her skin. Nights were the hardest. After tucking Grace and Oliver into bed, she would sit in the quiet living room, listening to Daniel's heavy footsteps upstairs. Every creak of the floorboards made her heart race. She prayed silently, not for herself, but for her children, that they would grow up to know a world kinder than the one Daniel had created for them. Grace sometimes asked innocent but painful questions. "Mom, why does Daddy hate us?" Sarah would hold her tight, forcing back tears, whispering, "He doesn't hate you, baby. He's just sick." But deep inside, she wondered how much longer her children could carry the scars of their father's cruelty. Oliver's innocence gave Sarah the deepest ache. He often ran into her arms after a beating, pressing his cheek against her bruises and whispering, "I'll protect you, Mommy." His words, tender and small, broke her heart. He was too young to know what protection meant. Yet somehow, he already understood that his mother needed saving. Daniel's dominance grew heavier with each passing day. He controlled Sarah's bank cards, checked her phone, and isolated her from family and friends. If anyone asked how she was doing, Daniel always answered first, smiling as though nothing was wrong. Sarah felt trapped in a cage invisible to everyone else. Still, a quiet flame remained alive in her heart. Despite the daily torment, she carried a seed of resilience. She thought of the children's future, of giving them a chance to breathe without fear, to laugh without guilt, to live without scars. That secret hope stayed with her through every bruise, every shouted insult, every sleepless night. One late evening, after Daniel had fallen asleep in his armchair, Sarah sat at the kitchen table. The clock ticked loudly on the wall, each second stretching into eternity. She placed her hands flat on the table, staring at her fingers trembling. "Something has to change," she whispered to herself. The thought frightened her, but it also gave her the smallest taste of freedom. In that moment, as the children slept soundly upstairs, Sarah realized she was standing at the edge of a choice. Continue enduring, or risk everything to save them all. The fear was crushing, yet the quiet strength in Oliver's words, "I'll protect you, Mommy," lingered in her mind. It was a reminder that even the smallest voice in a house of silence could spark the will to fight back. The night that finally broke Sarah began like so many others, with Daniel's anger boiling over something insignificant. A glass of water wasn't cold enough. His voice thundered through the house, sending Grace and Oliver scrambling to the stairs. Before Sarah could answer, his fist connected with her cheek, the impact so fierce she stumbled against the counter. She tasted blood. For a moment she thought she might black out, but the sight of Oliver's wide, terrified eyes at the doorway jolted her awake. Daniel's tirade lasted minutes, though it felt like an eternity. When he finally stormed off to the living room, muttering about how ungrateful they all were, Sarah crawled upstairs to her children. She found them huddled together under the blanket, their little bodies trembling. Grace tried to put on a brave face, whispering to her brother that it was all right. But Sarah saw the fear etched across her daughter's face. Something shifted inside her that night. She couldn't allow her children to keep growing up in this cage of violence. Quietly, she began packing. She stuffed a few clothes into a small duffel bag, tucked Oliver's favorite toy dinosaur inside, and slipped a photograph of happier times into the side pocket. Her hands shook as she moved, but her determination grew stronger with every breath. She waited until Daniel's snores filled the living room, the heavy rhythm of a man who felt invincible. Taking her children by the hand, she whispered, "We're going on an adventure. Stay quiet." Grace nodded solemnly, holding Oliver close as they tiptoed out of the house. The cold night air hit Sarah's face like freedom itself. She hurried them into the car, her heartbeat loud in her ears. As she drove away, every pair of headlights in the distance made her flinch. Every turn of the road felt like Daniel's shadow was right behind them. But as the house shrank into the distance, a fragile sense of relief began to form. Her first stop was a friend's house. Mark Thompson had been an old colleague, a kind man who had always shown concern but never pride. When Sarah knocked on his door in the middle of the night, bruised and shaking, he opened it without hesitation. Mark's eyes widened at the sight of her, then softened with understanding. "Come in," he said quietly, ushering her and the children inside. Mark didn't ask questions that night. He made up beds on the couch for Grace and Oliver, fetched ice for Sarah's swollen cheek, and brewed tea she could barely hold in her trembling hands. For the first time in years, Sarah felt the warmth of kindness without strings attached. The following days blurred together. Mark helped her contact a shelter that guided her towards safe housing. With their support, Sarah found a small apartment in a modest neighborhood. It wasn't much, just 2 small bedrooms and a kitchen that smelled faintly of paint. But it was theirs. Grace decorated the walls with her drawings, and Oliver lined his dinosaur toys on the windowsill. For the first time, the children laughed without fear of heavy footsteps silencing them. Sarah knew she needed more than just safety. She needed independence. Using skills she had long suppressed under Daniel's control, she started a small baking business. At first, she sold cupcakes to neighbors, then delivered pies to local cafes. Slowly, she built a circle of loyal customers who praised her talent and encouraged her efforts. Each sale felt like a small victory, proof that she could stand on her own 2 feet. Mark checked in often, never imposing, always supportive. He would bring groceries, help fix the leaky faucet, or watch the children while Sarah worked late. Grace quickly grew fond of him, seeing in him the steadiness she had long craved. Oliver, shy at first, warmed to Mark's gentle humor, laughing when he pretended the dinosaur toys were planning secret missions. For a while, Sarah allowed herself to breathe. She watched her children rediscover the freedom of play, their laughter filling the apartment like music she thought she'd lost forever. She dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had escaped the darkness for good. But late at night, when the children were asleep and the apartment was quiet, Sarah's thoughts turned back to Daniel. She knew him too well. He would never accept losing control. The image of his cold eyes and the sting of his threats still haunted her. Even as she folded dough in the morning light or watched Grace and Oliver chase each other in the park, the question gnawed at her. What happens when he finds us? Sarah pushed the thought aside each day, telling herself that distance and silence would keep them safe. Yet deep in her bones, she sensed the storm hadn't passed. It was only gathering strength, waiting for the right moment to strike. For a time, Sarah almost convinced herself that she and her children had stepped into a new chapter. The apartment grew warm with the scent of baked bread and cinnamon rolls, and the little business she started was thriving beyond expectation. Grace began to smile more often, showing her missing tooth with pride, while Oliver carried his toy dinosaur everywhere, introducing it to anyone who cared to listen. The laughter of children echoed through their modest home, proof that healing had begun. But peace has a way of feeling fragile when the past refuses to let go. It started one evening, as Sarah checked her phone after closing up her small kitchen workspace. Among messages from customers and casual reminders sat a single text from an unknown number. "You can't hide forever." Her hands froze around the phone, her breath catching. She read it again, hoping she had misinterpreted, but the words were blunt, heavy with menace. She deleted the message immediately, unwilling to let Grace or Oliver catch a glimpse. Yet the seed of dread planted itself firmly in her chest. The following week, Sarah awoke to find spray paint scrawled across the side of her car. Liar. The words screamed in red, stark against the silver paint. Neighbors murmured that it must have been teenagers pulling a cruel prank, but Sarah knew better. Her pulse quickened, her stomach tightening with every glance at the vandalized car. Days later, her tires were slashed. She discovered it early in the morning, rushing to prepare deliveries. She stared at the flat rubber, helpless anger flooding her. Mark offered to drive her that day, but Sarah couldn't shake the image of Daniel's smirk. She imagined him standing in the dark, blade in hand, watching, waiting. The tension escalated with each passing night. Strange noises at her window made her sit upright in bed. Clutching a kitchen knife she kept on her nightstand. Grace sensed the unease, asking softly if Daddy had found them. Sarah hugged her daughter close, whispering reassurances she wished she believed. Oliver, innocent and trusting, simply pressed his dinosaur into her hand, telling her it would protect her from the bad man. His words gave Sarah a fleeting comfort, but she could feel the shadow closing in. Then came the breaking point. One afternoon, she returned home to find an envelope tucked beneath her door. With trembling hands, she opened it. Inside was a photograph of Grace and Oliver, taken at the playground near their apartment. The children were smiling, oblivious to the lens aimed at them. But the angle was too close, the focus too sharp. Whoever had taken it had stood nearby, watching them play. Sarah's knees buckled as the picture slipped from her fingers. Her breath came in short, panicked gasps. She gathered the photo quickly, terrified that the children might see it. That night, she sat at the kitchen table long after they had fallen asleep, staring at the picture again and again. The implication was clear. Daniel had found them. She reported everything to the police. The texts, the vandalism, the photo, but the officers offered only weary nods and scripted reassurances. Without hard evidence linking him directly, there's not much we can do, ma'am. They wrote notes, filed reports, and left her with empty promises. Sarah walked out of the station more isolated than ever. Back at home, she locked every window, checked the doors twice, and slept with the lights on. She kept her children close, her eyes scanning the streets whenever she walked outside. She even changed her routine, hoping to confuse anyone who might be following them. But paranoia gnawed at her, eroding the fragile peace she had built. Mark noticed her exhaustion. He found her one morning, head bowed over a cup of untouched coffee, dark circles beneath her eyes. "You're not safe, Sarah," he said gently. "You need more than courage. You need help." She nodded, unable to speak. Pride and fear battled inside her, but the weight of reality pressed too hard. She couldn't keep pretending everything was under control, not with Grace and Oliver's lives hanging in the balance. That night, as Oliver whispered his usual promise, "I'll protect you, Mommy," Sarah clung to him tighter than ever. Tears burned her eyes, but she forced a smile, stroking his hair until he fell asleep. Her son's innocent words, spoken with the certainty of a child, stirred something deep within her. She couldn't give up. She wouldn't. But in her heart, she knew the storm was only beginning, and the battle to keep her children safe was far from over. Sarah clung to the hope that the police would be her shield. After the photograph of Grace and Oliver at the playground, she marched back to the station with trembling hands clutching the evidence. She explained the texts, the vandalism, the slashed tires, every detail that proved Daniel was near. She expected urgency, at least concern. But instead she found weary officers shuffling papers and sighing as though her fears were an inconvenience. "Ma'am, unless you can prove he's the one behind this, there's not much we can do," one officer said, sliding the photo back toward her. His tone carried the detachment of someone who had already decided the case wasn't worth his time. Sarah stared at him, disbelief tightening her throat. "That's my children. Someone watch them. Isn't that enough?" But the officer simply shook his head. Suspicion isn't evidence. If he hasn't broken into your home or directly harmed you since you left, the court won't move on this. She left the station with rage bubbling beneath her fear. She had done everything right, reported the threats, provided proof, and still the system had failed her. Worse than the indifference was the quiet implication that maybe she was exaggerating, maybe unstable. Daniel had predicted this. He always told her, "No one will believe you. They'll say you're hysterical." And now, standing in the cold outside the police station, Sarah realized how right he had been. It didn't take long before Margaret Mitchell, Daniel's mother, entered the fray. Margaret had never approved of Sarah, dismissing her as weak, unworthy of her son. Now she arrived at Sarah's apartment unannounced, her voice dripping with venom. "You've poisoned those children against their father," Margaret accused, standing tall in her designer coat. "You're unfit, Sarah. I'll see to it that Grace and Oliver are raised properly, away from your instability." Sarah's hand shook, but she held her ground. "You raised Daniel. You know what he is." Margaret's eyes flashed cold. "Daniel is a good man. You're the problem, and the courts will see that too." The threat hung in the air long after Margaret left. Sarah felt her chest tighten, her breath shallow. Losing the children. That was the fear that could shatter her completely. She had endured bruises, insults, and terror. But the thought of Grace and Oliver being handed back to Daniel's cruelty filled her with a despair she could hardly bear. Not long after, Sarah received a notice in the mail. Daniel had filed for custody. He claimed she was unstable, unfit to care for the children, and living in unsafe conditions. His petition painted him as a devoted father concerned for his children's welfare, while depicting Sarah as a reckless mother incapable of providing stability. Worse still, Daniel had begun reaching out to her relatives, cousins, uncles, even an aunt who had once comforted Sarah in private. All suddenly spoke in favor of Daniel. He had money, influence, and charm. Promises slipped easily from his lips, and bills slipped quietly into their pockets. One by one, people Sarah had trusted shifted away, their loyalty purchased by the man who had broken her bones and spirit. She watched her world narrow, betrayal pressing in from all sides. Her phone buzzed with messages from relatives urging her to do the right thing and let Daniel have the children. Her own blood, swayed by his influence, now doubted her sanity. The isolation grew unbearable. Mark noticed the toll it was taking. He found Sarah late one night, sitting at the kitchen table with a custody notice crumpled in her hand. "You're not alone in this," he said firmly. "He wants you to believe everyone's against you, but not everyone is." His words steadied her, but the reality remained. She was walking into a courtroom battle against a man who had manipulated everyone around her. Daniel was charming, articulate, and confident. Sarah was tired, bruised by years of torment, and branded as unstable by those who had never seen the truth. And yet, deep inside, something stirred again. Fear, yes, but also defiance. She thought of Grace's cautious smile returning, of Oliver's small arms wrapping around her after every nightmare. She couldn't let Daniel win. She couldn't let the system, stacked against her, take away the only light left in her life. Still, as she tucked the children into bed that night, Sarah wondered how far Daniel would go, and whether the truth would ever find its way to the surface before it was too late. The courtroom was colder than Sarah imagined, not in temperature but in spirit. The high ceilings and polished wood carried an intimidating weight, making her feel small and fragile. She clutched Oliver's toy dinosaur in her bag like a talisman, a secret comfort in a place that seemed designed to break her resolve. Grace and Oliver stayed with Mark in the hallway, their innocent voices drifting faintly through the heavy doors before silence fell. Daniel walked in with the confidence of a man who had never faced consequences. His suit was pressed, his shoes shined to a gleam, his expression solemn but composed. He greeted his lawyer with a handshake and even offered a polite nod toward the judge, as if he were simply here on business. To the onlookers, he looked like a father unfairly separated from his children, not the man whose fists had carved bruises into Sarah's skin. Sarah sat stiffly at her table, her palms damp, her heart pounding. Her lawyer whispered reassurances, but doubt pressed in from all sides. When Daniel spoke, he did so with practiced sincerity. "Your Honor," he began, his voice steady and smooth, "I love my children. I've always provided for them, ensured their safety, and given them the stability every child deserves. My concern is that since Sarah left, they've been placed in dangerous conditions. She moves them constantly, she works odd hours, and she's emotionally unstable. I worry for their well-being." Every word twisted the truth, reshaping years of abuse into a story where he was the victim. Sarah wanted to scream, to stand and tell the judge what nights with Daniel had truly been like, but her throat felt tight, as though invisible hands were pressing her voice back down. Margaret sat proudly behind her son, her chin lifted in smug approval. When it was her turn to speak, she painted Sarah as a reckless mother, neglectful and hysterical. "My grandchildren deserve better," she declared, her voice trembling with false concern. "Daniel has always been a responsible, devoted father. Sarah has always struggled." Each word cut deeper than the last. To hear her pain minimized, her struggles twisted into flaws, left Sarah trembling. She glanced around the courtroom and saw familiar faces, her own relatives, sitting on Daniel's side. Some avoided her eyes, others whispered to each other, but none offered her even the smallest sign of support. When Sarah finally took the stand, she felt the weight of their disbelief pressing down on her. She described the abuse, the threats, the fear that had consumed her children's lives. But as she spoke, she saw skepticism in the judge's eyes, doubt lingering in the jurors' expressions. Without bruises visible, without video or recordings, her words felt like fragile glass, shattering against the wall of Daniel's performance. Her lawyer pressed gently, guiding her through the testimony, but Sarah's voice cracked as she recalled the night she fled. The courtroom listened politely, yet she sensed their pity was not enough. Daniel's lawyer countered smoothly, dismissing her accounts as exaggerations, suggesting she was projecting her own instability onto her children. By the end of the day, Sarah sat drained, her hands trembling as she held the pen to sign yet another paper. Daniel smiled faintly across the room, his confidence unshaken. The judge announced the trial would continue in the coming weeks, but Sarah already felt the tide turning against her. Outside the courtroom, she gathered Grace and Oliver into her arms, inhaling the scent of their hair, clinging to their warmth as though it could anchor her. Grace whispered, "Mom, are we going to be okay?" Sarah forced a smile, nodding quickly, though tears threatened to spill. Mark placed a hand on her shoulder. "This isn't over. You're stronger than he thinks." But in that moment, Sarah wasn't sure. The system seemed to favor Daniel's polished lies, his influence stretching like invisible chains across every corner of her life. She walked to the car with her children, her head bowed, wondering how much longer she could fight a battle where truth seemed invisible and justice felt impossibly out of reach. As Oliver climbed into his seat, he looked at her with wide, trusting eyes. He whispered the same words he always did. "I'll protect you, Mommy." This time, Sarah squeezed his hand longer than usual, a flicker of hope warming her chest. She didn't know how, but something told her that Oliver's quiet promise might one day hold more power than anyone expected. My wonderful viewers, the battle is only just beginning. Sarah's world seems to be crumbling under Daniel's lies. But will the truth ever shine through? Stay with me for part 2, where a voice too small to be noticed will change everything.